Hello there. So today I'm going to talk to you about some alternatives to neutering in male cats and dogs. So the big alternative, most people are familiar with this term, is a vasectomy, because that's something that they do in male humans to keep them from having children. That is where they cut or ligate the little tube that leads from the testicle to the outside world, so no little sperm that are created in that testicle can make the journey so that they cannot impregnate a female. Vasectomies are not something that's going to be done at every single vet clinic, just because it is kind of considered microsurgery. No matter how big the dog and how big the testicle, the tubes are not that big. Now, if you shop around, you can absolutely find clinics that do this procedure. It is typically going to be more expensive than a neuter because it is a more in-depth surgery. It does take a little bit longer of a procedure. Another alternative, which I don't believe is allowed in the United States anymore, or at least it's not a product that's readily available, is there was an injection at one point that you would inject directly into the testicles that would either temporarily or permanently, just depending on the situation, sterilize the male. I did like the injection. I used it a couple of times, probably 10 or 15 years ago, but it's not something that's commonplace anymore. It was more of an aesthetic thing for dogs to keep the testicles at that point, because it could mess with the testosterone a little bit, so they didn't necessarily keep their normal level of hormones. They just weren't able to breed. The ones that I used it in were dogs that had congenital heart conditions, so they really weren't safe for anesthesia, but the owners didn't want them to breed. They just wanted them to live out the little bit of heart-healthy life they were going to have. So we did that injection so that they couldn't have kids and pass on the congenital issues, but they also couldn't have anesthesia. It was surprising to me that these dogs tolerated it pretty darn well without sedation or anesthesia, but they did. So those are your main alternatives to neutering. I can get into some other weird things about neutering if anyone would like nudicles where you put in fake testicles after they get neutered or whatnot, but that's not really any different than any other neuter procedures. That's why I'm not including it here.